Welcome to the Fade 5 College Edition. Ben Wittenstein with you, Nate Jacobson on the other side. Nate, we're doing the Fade 5, but instead of the NFL, like Brad Nate does, we're going to be doing college, man. You excited?
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm very excited. College football weeks 1 and 2 were good. They were very good for both of us. On the website where Brad gave us the opportunity to write articles, so now he's giving us the opportunity to talk about some games and maybe some more games and add to that.
Yeah, we're very excited to get started. We have a lot of bets to get to. And of course, what we do and what they do on the Fade 5, we're going to try to do for the college edition too. And you can follow us at our lovely social media handles here on my left-hand side. But Nate, we are going to hop aboard the Plus Bus. Get on the bus because we have plus 100 or better wagers that we have for this Saturday. Some underdogs that we really like. Nate, we'll start with you. What's an underdog that you love this Saturday afternoon?
I don't know about love, but I think there's some value on the money line in Washington State. They're playing Washington. They're renewing the Apple Cup, even though Washington has gone to the Big Ten, left Washington State behind in the Pac-2. So I think we're going to get a very motivated Washington State playing at Lumen Field where the Seahawks play. So pretty much a semi-road game for Washington State, but they did beat Texas Tech last week. And Washington, a team I'm not very high on this year, I have a pretty aggressive bet under their regular season win total of 7.5.
Ooh.
So I would love if Washington State pulled off the upset here as a plus 170 underdog on the money line to win outright. So putting my faith in the Cougars in a game that I'm sure the players are going to get up for and the coaches are going to make sure they're super motivated after what the Huskies did to them by neglecting them and leaving the conference and kind of breaking up the Pac-12.
A little revenge game possible kind of thing?
I mean, definitely. I mean, if you're a player, you kind of will have a chip on your shoulder, you have to imagine. So I'd expect an all-out effort from Washington State. This is kind of their Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that bet. I think in a game like this where, everyone talks about, you could throw the record books out, you could throw this, throw that out. Nothing really matters when it's a rivalry. It kind of is nice, especially to bet on an underdog that a lot of people really don't think have a shot to win the game. In a game like this where you have that revenge factor, they're not a bad team as they've shown with prior wins. Plus 170, Nate. Plus bus looking real good right now.
Let's go Cougs.
All right, we got for my bet, let's go. We'll stay on the western side of the United States, but we're going to go to Laramie, Wyoming. That's right. Wyoming money line, Nate. I really like them over BYU. I like them for a couple of reasons. One, I liked them a little bit last week. Luckily, I didn't make an actual bet on them because that line just got a little too much out of the way. It was like 7.7 or something like that against Idaho, which I thought would be a great game, bounce back game for Wyoming after a loss at Arizona State. And is also, I thought, a great spot to fade Idaho after almost beating Oregon. Unfortunately, Wyoming just did not look good. Offensively, they didn't look good in any sort of way. Idaho clearly is a very decent team this season, taking Oregon kind of down to the last quarter. They played well on the road against Wyoming after a game where they could have put all their apples in a basket, so to speak, for that kind of game against Oregon. So they did a really good job winning 2 in a row. But now you have BYU coming into Laramie, Nate. And as we all know, weird stuff happens in Laramie, Wyoming, especially for a night game like this. There's going to be wind blowing. It's tough for teams to kind of fly into there. You get a little turbulence, you get a little nervous coming into Laramie. So listen, I kind of like Wyoming having a bounce back game here. I think offensively, they've been underperforming offensively. They have some new guys. They really haven't been able to move the ball against some of these teams. I think they can fix that against this BYU team. He's coming into a foreign environment. It's going to be loud. It's going to be kind of a wild kind of game. So I know it's kind of a flyer. I know it's really out there. You can get them at a good price at plus 350 though on MGM. Might as well take a little flyer in Wyoming.
And also the sandwich spot for BYU. They're coming off an upset win Friday night at SMU. Where they're a double-digit underdog. They win outright. If you look ahead to BYU's schedule, the Big 12 opener against Kansas State at home. Kansas State regarded as one of the better teams in the Big 12, and they're going to Provo for the Big 12 after dark game. What we used to see, the Pac-12 after dark, that late ESPN game. The Big 12 now has that time slot, and it's going to be a big game in BYU. So definitely a situational disadvantage for BYU. I just don't know if I can get behind this Wyoming team that was a complete no-show against Arizona State and then lost to Idaho at home. Maybe Wyoming's just not a touchable team, but if there's ever a time to go after them, this is a good spot to fade BYU.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with Wyoming is I have thought they would play better the first 2 weeks of the season. I thought they had better personnel. I thought the coaching would be a little bit better. And they have failed both those tests in the last 2 weeks. And I still think they're underperforming what that team could be. So this is one of those things where it's like, listen, you get them at home, tough place to play for opponents to come in. You can get them at plus 350. Clearly the market is dead low on this Wyoming team. This is going to kind of be the last chance for me to probably bet on them at all, unless they, if they lose, I'm out on them the rest of the season. So a last game flyer, last time they can prove themselves to me, they're going to be at home at night. Seems like a decent spot to hit Wyoming. But Nate, we got the fade 5. It's fade 5 for a reason. We got 5 bets. Each of us have 2, and we're going to decide if we want to fade or follow the other. And then the last one, we both agree on that bet. So that's very exciting. So let's get to our number 5 bet. Nate, you'll start us off.
Number 5.
All right, let's go to the SEC.
Number 5.
A lot of number 5s, Nate. All right, what do you like?
Is that good? I'm good.
You're good.
Right,
go ahead.
Let's go to the SEC. We're going to go with Georgia. We're going to take it first half, only 30 minutes. They're playing Kentucky. The game's in Lexington. Maybe a little bit of a tricky spot for Georgia, but I think they're going to be fully focused for this game. A few reasons I like this bet. First, I kind of like Georgia for the full game, laying 24. They're the most talented team in the country, at least roster-wise. They're well coached. They have Carson Beck. And Kentucky is really reeling, coming off a 31-6 loss to South Carolina. Not a good look at all. So another reason I like him, Kentucky's quarterback is Georgia transfer Brock Vandagriff, who last week was 3 of 10 for 30 yards, was sacked a bunch of times against South Carolina's defensive line. I think he's going to struggle against Georgia. Plus, Georgia's going to know how to game plan for him because they're so familiar with Vandagriff. He was in the program for 3 years as a backup. He just couldn't beat out Stetson Bennett, and then Carson Beck beat out the job for him with him last spring. But the reason I'm going first half, and I know, Ben, you probably could attest to this because you've been following college football from a betting perspective for a while. But one of the coaches we know who knows what the point spread is Mark Stoops. And he's the Kentucky's head coach. And I was looking back at some of the history of maybe Mark Stoops in this spot where he tries to cover the spread. And 3 years ago, they played in Athens, this Kentucky against Georgia game. Kentucky was a 21.5-point underdog. On the final drive of the game, down 30-7, the Kentucky went on a 22-play, 75-yard drive that took over 11 minutes. This is back when Will Levis was the quarterback and his star receiver is Wan'Dale Robinson. That's how long ago it was. But they had no tempo at all. They had no urgency at all. They just marched down the field with the only purpose to cover that number. And I know Kirby Smart was so frustrated because he knew what Mark Stoops was doing. So just in case we get in a situation where Georgia's up 28 late in the game, and then Mark Stoops puts in the 4-minute offense and says, guys, take your time, but we're going to need to cover for the boosters who have been betting the horses. We need to build up those boosters bankrolls before they bet at Keeneland next month for the fall meet. That's a very strong possibility. So take the full game out of it. Georgia's going to get off to a good start, pick up where they left off the second half against Clemson week 1, and they're going to cover this number and be up by 14 or more at halftime. And then you don't have to worry about any of the full game madness with Mark Stoops that we often see maybe a couple times a year when they're in this big underdog role.
Nate, I have to follow you on this one. You know how much I love Georgia first half bets. They were a moneymaker last season. They were a moneymaker, honestly, 2 seasons ago. This is a team that does not care what time the game is, where the game is, how it's played. They come out of the gates hot. Kirby Smart always has his guys ready to play, and he knows what type of situation they are in this season where, there's expectations for them to get to the national championship. They were ranked number 1 overall to start the season. They want to play up to that. So I think they try to get to a fast start. And we saw that Kentucky is certainly struggling. And you mentioned a lot of their struggles. Turnover-wise, they weren't great. Offensive line's not great. So there's a lot of issues with this team that when you're playing a team like Georgia, you just can't have. And there's really no margin of error against this Bulldogs team. And there's going to be plenty of opportunities, I think, for them to take advantage of that. So I really do like this Georgia first half bet. The logic behind not going full game, I love it. I can get behind that as well. And we know Mark Stoops does love.
I couldn't believe
a little thing.
I couldn't believe a 22-play drive when you're down 3 scores. It's not like it was let's try to run some hurry up, see if we could score, get the onside kick. Like they were playing for one reason, and it was to cover the number 3 years ago in an October game in Athens. So
Got to keep the boosters happy, baby.
It's the name of the game.
All right, let's go number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4, Nate, we're going to go right back to the SEC. We're going to take an under. Texas A&M, Florida, under 47. I don't think I can trust either of these teams on either side to get me a win. I was on Florida, and they did not look good in the last couple of weeks. Texas A&M, we saw them against Notre Dame. Offensively, they just did not look good. They played Samford in week 2. Of course, they look good offensively in week 2. I mean, they ran the heck out of that ball against Samford. They had a great running game. But now that these two teams are facing each other, and I wrote about it on gamingjuice.com, little promo if you guys want to go see the written reason behind this game. Both these teams have kind of taken a similar path. If you look at week 1 for both these teams, they had an early loss. It was kind of a surprising loss, and it was a loss that wasn't super expected. They didn't look good in the loss. Florida to Miami, Texas A&M to Notre Dame, and then they go week 2. They play FCS teams. They both look great. They look dominant. Everything kind of looks like it's fixed. So now in week 3, they're playing each other. And I think we are going to see more offensive struggles by both teams. Connor Wegman, we know for Texas A&M, he just struggles to throw the ball downfield, man. You ask him to throw the ball 25 plus yards, he just can't do it. He was one of those quarterbacks last year who struggled to throw 40 plus yard deep shots. And I think we're going to see similar types of issues in this game where that deep shot passing game for Texas A&M is just going to be non-existent. They're going to be having to run the ball a lot. They're going to be having short passes, which is going to run clock. It's going to prevent lots of scoring to happen so quickly. So that's a big reason I like the under. On the Florida side, we don't even know who's going to be starting or getting the majority of snaps. I mean, you have Graham Mertz coming from a concussion, and he's been okay. I think the game plan is a little bit shorter in terms of offensive ability when he plays. And then you have DJ Lagway, who Billy Napier seemed to love after the freshman performed really well in week 2 in their FCS game against McNeese State. But again, we don't really know how he's going to play against a pretty good Texas A&M defense. So for me, Nate, all of these signs where we're not really going to get good offensive teams, both on the A&M side, on the Florida side, it screams under to me.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm actually going to fade this, and there's a couple of reasons why, and it's all to do with Florida. I know that they're saying they're going to split snaps between Lagway and Mertz, but I feel like if Billy Napier wants to save his job, he needs to make sure that the number 1 player in the 2024 class plays and shows progress, and that's the only way they're going to be able to, or Napier's going to save his job, and it's the only way Lagway is going to stay around in Gainesville if he gets opportunities. And because he's a true freshman, there's opportunities where he has some flash plays, some explosive plays, but also opportunities where he turns the ball over and sets up short fields for Texas A&M. So because of that, I would be scared betting the under there. And then also Florida's defense. I mean, they seem like they quit against Miami. And if things go bad early on in Gainesville and people start booing and leaving the stadium early to go to their tailgates or the bars in Gainesville, I could see Florida's defense quitting and not wanting to tackle. And I know Wegman has a lot of questions, but I feel like A&M can kind of lean on their run game against a Florida defense that really struggled against Miami in week 1. So I'd be cautious there. Maybe it's a slow start early on and both teams are conservative, but I could see this kind of shooting out a little bit and kind of getting out of control.
I will say against McNeese State, A&M ran the ball 38 times. So I'm very interested to see how much Mike Elko trusts Connor Wegman on the road in the swamp. I know the defensively, I do also have questions for Florida, so I think you're absolutely right. But is Wegman in that offense going to be good enough, even if that Florida defense is bad, to move the ball? So it'll be interesting. We have a disagreement. That's fine. First disagreement of the show. That's all right. But Nate, I'm very excited for your next pick. Let's go to number 3.
Number 3.
And we're staying in the SEC. It's a big SEC week. It's the best conference in America, especially with the additions of Texas and Oklahoma. There's going to be so many good games to talk about each week. Let's go on LSU -7. This is the early game. They're playing at South Carolina, so road favorite. Usually, I don't usually love backing the road favorite, but I think the LSU is undervalued because they lost already this year. But this is common for LSU under Brian Kelly. In 2022, they lose to Florida State and New Orleans. Last year, they played Florida State and Orlando. They lose that game. And then they ended up bouncing back nicely both those seasons. In 2022, they win the SC West. Last year, they get Jaden Daniels the Heisman. So I think it's kind of familiar territory for LSU to bounce back. They're playing a South Carolina team who I mentioned beat Kentucky 31-6, but South Carolina only had 253 total yards. They had a pick six late, and this South Carolina team struggled with Old Dominion in week one. So I'm not a huge fan of South Carolina, and I think we can buy low on LSU. Garrett Nussmeier is going to be able to throw if he's protected by his offensive line that has two future NFL offensive tackles. So I like LSU here in a similar spot to where they were last year, where they were a road favorite at Mississippi State. They won that game 41-14. Not expecting them to run away with this game, but I do like them to win by more than a touchdown and get their season back on track.
Nate, I'm following you. I love this bet. You mentioned this in our group chat the other day, and you look at South Carolina, and you mentioned a lot of good reasons. They're just coming off. The win was good for them last week, but I think there was a lot of reasons why they won, and it didn't really have to do with South Carolina, if we're being honest. There was a lot of mistakes made on the Kentucky side. So to me, this is a great spot to follow LSU. Everything that everyone remembers for LSU after being on national television was them losing, them playing poorly down the stretch. And I think that's just not the team they're going to be in a game like this against a lesser opponent. Quarterback-wise, I think they're going to do great. Throwing-wise, we know offensively that they can move this ball. I really like this. I'm surprised that number's still at 7 at most places, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some 7.5s, but for the most part, you can still get 7.
Yeah, it's stayed at 7 all week since Sunday when I bet it. So yeah, it's been steady at 7. And I should have mentioned, I don't think I said it. Maybe I did, but LSU lost to USC in Las Vegas in week 1. So
yeah,
versus was Florida State the last 2 years on neutral fields, or I guess it was semi-home in New Orleans in 2 years ago, and then in Orlando, which was basically a road game because Florida State packed that place. But yeah, against USC, it was a game they were up in the fourth quarter, and yeah. I don't take too much stock into that loss. I also think USC, going into the year, I was higher on USC, and I think now the market has kind of caught up to the Trojans after their start. So I think this is kind of a fresh slate. LSU start conference play strong because the season's still in front of them, even though they lost with the 12-team playoff. Obviously, you could still win the SEC, but you could also make the playoff at a 9-3 mark.
I'll be honest, I was very impressed with Nussmeier in the USC game. Yeah. I know down the stretch of that game, he had some iffy throws, but for the most part, man, his accuracy was unbelievable. He was throwing some amazing balls, and I think against a South Carolina defense that's definitely not probably at the level of USC, we're going to see a much better, if not a greater performance from Nussmeier and LSU. Also, don't forget, I wanted to mention, and Nate's involved with this too, you can sign up for a free account at thegamingjuice.com. Nate and myself, all our writings are there. Brad's writings are there. We have great coverage of the NFL, of college football. I'm going to do some NBA writing, got some WNBA writing as well. We've got everything going on at thegamingjuice.com. It's free to sign up, free to read the articles. You're missing out by not doing it at all. Let's go to our number 2 play. Number two, Nate. And I'm going to go to the state of Indiana. And we're going to go under on the Purdue team total against Notre Dame. It's at 17.5, minus 125. A little juiced up at FanDuel, but I still like this number, especially over 17. I'm not high on Purdue. I'm just not. And I like Notre Dame coming off a loss to NIU. I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to stop a Purdue team that the last time everyone saw them, they scored 49 points, but it was against Indiana State. I don't think this is a Purdue team that was as good or as offensively capable as we saw against Indiana State. Notre Dame's going to be upset. They're going to be able to get away from South Bend, get on the road, but it's not going to be a road game for them. There's plenty of Notre Dame fans that are going to be going to West Lafayette and going to this game at Purdue. So it's not really going to feel like a road game, I'm sure, for Notre Dame. They're upset after a loss against NIU. We know this Notre Dame defense is good. We know what they can do. And I think Purdue, having watched that NIU game, Nate, and having seen what NIU did to have that success, is they have long drives. They wanted to sustain his drive as long as possible, not give the ball back, and make sure they won that time of possession. Now, Notre Dame, or not Purdue, if they're going to try to do that against Notre Dame, that'd be great, because I think they're going to try to win the time of possession to keep the ball away from Notre Dame, that offense, and Riley Leonard, as long as he's healthy. But I don't know if they're going to be able to finish drive. So under 17.5, we can afford 2 touchdowns. That's about it. I would be surprised if Purdue scores 3 touchdowns in against Notre Dame in this game. I really would. I don't really trust this offense. It's going to be their second game of the season. They had a weird week 2 bye. To me, this game screams Notre Dame domination. I don't hate the spread. It's a little high for my liking, so I'm just going to fade Purdue and go under on the team total.
Yeah, I'll follow this. I was looking at the under in this game, especially if Riley Leonard isn't 100% the Notre Dame quarterback. But yeah, I would expect a really strong effort from Notre Dame's defense against a Purdue offense that has an experienced quarterback in Hudson Card, but just doesn't have the pieces around him to be successful against the Notre Dame talent. So yeah, I think this is a good bounce back spot for at least Notre Dame's defense. I'm not sure if they're going to cover the full game spread, but I'm looking towards the under anyway. So I'll agree with you here.
I do. As an IU guy, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to fade Purdue in that situation. Let's go to our number one play.
Number 1.
Nate, this is the play we both love. I'm going to go down to Florida. I will open it up. You explain it. UCF money line. What do you like?
Yeah, UCF is going to TCU this week, opening up Big 12 play. And UCF is a team that I wrote up in the Big 12 preview, a team that I like to go over their win total 7.5. Just like the pairing of KJ Jefferson, a former Arkansas quarterback. He was there for a while. And going into a Gus Malzahn offense where I think he's really going to succeed. Malzahn had some really good run concepts, especially back in the days at Auburn. And Jefferson kind of fits that, prototypical quarterback that Malzahn wants running his offense. They also have two really good running backs in Penny Boone and RJ Harvey. So kind of that run attack, I think, is going to really have their way against a TCU defense that I'm not really high on. And Stanford was able to move the ball on them in that Friday night in week 1. So yeah, this line has moved where it was UCF opened as an underdog and now is flipped to a favorite in Fort Worth. So a lot of support on the Golden Knights. I still think there's a little bit of value on them just to win this game outright at -129. So on the Knights this week, and I know you are too. And if you want to explain your reasoning, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you made a great point, and I think the thing I would add, just full transparency. I mean, I got this at +1.5, and this line moved real fast the other day, and I still like that it's under 3. As long as you can get this under 3, if you like the 2.5, I think that's fine. We're gonna go kind of the safe route and go the money line. But I think the main thing that you mentioned, that TCU defense, I don't trust them at all. We were on Stanford +9, +10 week 1, whatever that number was. And a big part of it was because people really didn't think much of Stanford, but that TCU defense it's not good. And I think we're going to see, even though they're going to be at home, I think we're going to see UCF. Malzahn is such a good coach. He's going to be able to coach a phenomenal time offensively for this UCF team. And I think they're going to be able to carve the TCU defense up. UCF's going to win this, Nate. I think that's why we both loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this game just to see how good UCF is and if they can kind of reach that potential with Malzahn, with KJ Jefferson. And I know Jefferson last year was in Arkansas in a really bad spot. They had Dan Enos as offensive coordinator who wants his quarterbacks to be pocket passers, which is not what Jefferson is. So Malzahn is going to make the most of his skill set, and he has two really good running backs with him in that backfield.
Yeah, and Jefferson's been with Malzahn now for a couple games. They've slowly, building repertoire with each other and trying to figure out how each other works. So this might be the perfect time to be able to utilize that. Bonus time, Nate. Trying to do my best Brad impression there. It's time for some bonus time. Before we get to our picks, don't forget you can rate, review. You can fade or follow us on X, on Twitter. I'm a Twitter guy, not an X guy. It's at Ben Wittenstein and at Nate Jacobson 1. You can see it on the side of the screen. If you're listening, it's at Ben Wittenstein and at Nate Jacobson 1. You want me to start, Nate, with this one? I mentioned Indiana, so I might as well just go with Indiana. It's the Indiana UCLA under 46.5. Now, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of debate, a lot of chatter in the Indiana circles, Nate, this week because IU goes on the road. They go to the Rose Bowl. They play UCLA, and they're favored. They're favored. They're favored by 2.5, favored by a field goal at some spots. And people, not only are they favored, Nate, but people are actually betting Indiana as a favorite on the road in California playing UCLA. I don't know if I can get behind that. I'll be quite honest. Indiana has played well, but their competition over the last couple of weeks has been an FCS team where they scored 77 points against Western Illinois. And then week 1, they played a smaller team in FIU. They did pretty well as well. They've only given up 10 points on the season. And that's kind of a big reason I like the under because offensively, I think they're going to struggle a little bit against this UCLA defense, which was a bright spot in their win on the island in Hawaii. They won 16-13. They only gave up 13 points. And really their only bright spot in that game was their defense. And I think Indiana and Keith Rourke, they've played some really good some really bad teams to open the season. And I think this is going to be their first good defense that they see. So I think they're going to struggle a little bit defensively. And then on the UCLA side, Nate, I don't know about you. I don't trust the UCLA offense. Ethan Garbers threw 2 interceptions against Hawaii. He just did not look good. His offensive line wasn't very good. Receivers were so. So this is a UCLA offense I don't trust. It's an Indiana offense that hasn't really been tested yet. I like the IU defense, and the UCLA defense has some pretty good stats as well. 11 tackles for loss, which would rank 4th in the country in their first game. So to me, this is going to be a heavy defensive game. It has bet down from 52. It's already at 46.5. I don't know if I would go lower than 45.5, but I do like the under at 46.5. I think there's a very minimal scoring for Indiana's prime time debut on NBC this season.
I actually kind of like Indiana in this game and hope they win as a UCLA regular season under ticket holder. So go Hoosiers. I don't care how.
Let's go.
Under. Go Coach Siggs. Let's go.
Coach Siggs is saving the program. All right, Nate, bonus time for you. What do you like?
Bonus time. We're going to get a sandwich spot. We're going to Tulsa.
Ooh.
They're hosting Oklahoma State. We're going to take Tulsa plus the 19.5. Fading Oklahoma State, as I mentioned, a sandwich spot. Oklahoma State last week, a team that I bet against in the articles at gamingjuice.com against Arkansas. And Arkansas ended up covering the closing number, and it was a very fortunate win by Oklahoma State. They won in double overtime by 8, but they also were outgained by 300 yards. Their post-game win expectancy was like 15%, maybe even less than that. So Oklahoma State, very fortunate in that game. Now you look at week 4 and some of the marquee games there, and probably something we're going to write about next week on the Gaming Juice, is their game against Utah. Utah goes to Oklahoma State. Very big game in terms of who might represent one of the 2 teams that represents or part of the Big 12 title game later this year when those 2 teams meet up. So I could see a little bit of a look ahead or a sandwich spot created because you just had that big win against Arkansas. You're looking ahead at Utah. Now you have a weird trip to Tulsa. It's not even in Stillwater. You're going on the road. So I expect Tulsa, a team where a lot of, whenever a team from the G5 has to play a Power 5 team within their own state, a lot of those players are going to be super motivated because they got passed over by an Oklahoma State most likely. So I'd expect a really good effort from Tulsa in this game, and situationally, it makes a lot of sense to back them. So Tulsa plus 19.5 is my bonus time if you want something a little bit off the board.
I love it, Nate. I think I'm going to follow you there. I mean, you gave some really good reasons. I have no other reasons to give why I like Tulsa, but I think your argument is good. I'll take the points in that situation, plus 19.5. Don't forget, you can rate and review the Fade 5 College Edition, and we have the Fade 5 normal NFL Edition, Brad Evans and Nate Lundy. It's all on this YouTube channel if you're watching it as well, so you can subscribe. You can get all these updates. We're going to be doing this once a week, Nate and I, so you'll get your college football picks as well every week. Around Wednesday, around Thursday, we're going to give our 5 picks, our underdogs, our bonus bets. So you'll be getting a ton of college football bets from us every single week here on the YouTube page, podcast as well. You can follow me, Ben Wittenstein. You can follow Nate at Nate Jacobson. And also, if you want to see our writing, we write on a bunch of other games as well that we don't mention on the show. It's at the Gaming Juice. And guys, it's all free. Everything is free. You don't have to get out your wallet. You don't have to get out your credit card. It's all free. Sign up for a free account. Read the free articles. You can talk to Brad. You can talk to us. You can yell at us. Do whatever you want to do. It's all free. No payment needed at thegamingjuice.com. But that'll do it for us. Nate Jacobson, Ben Wittenstein, good luck in week 3 of college football, and we will see you all next week.